right. So we are back, still here. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. With another episode of Bank Chats 2 Cents with Jeff McTavish.
Hey, Drew.
And myself, of course, and just the two of us today, as is typical with Bank Chats 2 Cents, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you found an article. I'm going to let you explain the article.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about the article. I'm going to make some jokes, just say, because this article is a little bit ridiculous on the surface level. But I think there's stuff in there that is worth going through.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So tell us about the article, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. So I was just perusing the internet for financial news, and
As you do.
Yeah. And so there was a YouTube episode of Hot Ones that came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like this, but with chicken wings and celebrities.
So better.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's this, but better.
A little bit. But they had Serena Williams on, and one of the topics that they had talked about, or that they had briefly mentioned, was that at one point she had $1 million check that she had won from one of her matches, and she tried to deposit it through the drive-thru of her bank.
Gotcha.
And they had told her, you better come in for this one. So she learned a valuable lesson. I guess this was years ago, but if you have a large check, it's not as easy as going up to your depository ATM and popping it in there and depositing your check. There's a little bit more involved.
Yeah. So what? So did they take her? Like, how does the story end? Like, does she take?
That's where the story ends.
Oh, that's where. Okay.
Yeah. That was it.
So in other words,
it had to do with banking.
Yeah.
And
So I when you told me this, my first reaction was how awful for Serena Williams that she's driving around with $1 million check in her car and just forgot it existed.
Yeah, that's a great problem to have.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
But then on a whim, we're like, oh well, since I'm driving by, I'll just go ahead and pop through the drive-thru and deposit my $1 million check.
Like it's nothing.
Like it's no big deal. I wish I had these problems.
Yes.
Like this. Yeah. This is I mean, don't get me wrong. The woman is a fantastic player and a fantastic athlete, and she deserves everything that she has.
Yeah.
But I would love to be so well off that I could forget that I had $1 million check.
Yeah.
That I hadn't yet deposited. So okay, so all things, I'm done ragging on Serena Williams now, because I am nobody and she can crush me like a bug. But it does bring up some good points in terms of, and those of us that will never have $1 million check, right? It still applies.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things that we can talk about and dissect this a little bit and talk about why banks do what they do when it comes to checks and deposits and things like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess the question is, first of all, I guess based on the story, the question is, why wouldn't they take the check through the drive-thru?
So normally, if it's a transaction that's outside of your norm, they may question it, but who knows? That could be, a legitimate transaction for her,
Could be. Yeah, it could be pretty typical for her, theoretically.
Right.
But you're right. The first thing that most banks are going to want to do is know their customer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that, hey, this person, whoever it is typically depositing large value checks,
mm-hmm.
and they have an account with you that they've had in long standing and it's in good shape and it has a relatively equal amount of money in there, this might not have been a big deal, right?
Right.
But it's still $1 million. I mean, this is a big check. And so the bank has to protect themselves as well, because in reality, you don't know. I mean, you assume that somebody like Serena Williams is not trying to conduct fraud,
mm-hmm.
but
you don't know.
You don't know where she got that check. You may know her, but you don't know where she got the check.
Mm-hmm.
She might have played a charity event and they wrote her a novelty check for all you know, right? I mean, It has nothing to do with her.
Right.
So the bank has to be protective of not only themselves, but also the customer,
mm-hmm.
right? Because ultimately the customer is responsible for they made the deposit. They're responsible for that. If that check bounces, the bank has to try to recover that money somehow. And the first thing they're going to do is try to recover it from the customer that gave them the bum check.
Yeah.
So these laws or regulations, I should say, they exist not only to protect the bank, but also to protect the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So probably one of the first things that they did when they asked her to come inside was they probably looked at that, and they probably looked at her accounts and did all their due diligence to make sure that everything seemed on the up and up. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we're making assumptions here based on a very small story on a very much better podcast. I can't. Anyway. But my guess is then after that, they probably put a hold on the check. So have you ever had a hold put on a check?
I don't think I've ever tried to deposit a check large enough that would require a hold, but
Fair enough.
I mean, I have an idea what they are.
Okay.
They're going to hold the check to make sure that those funds are available.
Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, before I got into banking, I had no idea that they would ever hold checks. I just assumed that when you took a check to the bank, they just deposited it in your account and you went on your way.
Yeah.
But there are people that for whatever reason, whether it's they get an inheritance or they get an insurance payout, maybe it's that they got a I don't know, some sort of a windfall, whatever it is. They won the lottery. They got a big bonus at work. For whatever it is, if somebody brings a check into the bank and says, "Well, I want to deposit this," and it's outside the norm of their normal deposit, behavior. Chances are the bank's going to say, well, we need to put a deposit hold on this, right? And that can make people irritated sometimes because it makes you feel sometimes like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's true. Like, in most cases, people aren't doing anything wrong. They're just legitimately trying to deposit something that they feel is true. But in some cases, that check, the bank wants to make sure that the funds are actually available, the check doesn't bounce, so they can put a hold on it. Now, normally, according to Regulation CC, okay, most banks, what they'll do is they have to provide you with $200 of that deposit the next business day. And then traditionally, the remaining amount of the deposit, whatever it is, by the second business day.
Okay. Why two? I mean,
I don't know.
Okay.
The regulation says $200. But that's what it is.
Okay.
Probably because the regulation was written at a time when $200 was a lot more money.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's my guess.
Okay.
But that's what the rule says. So the regulation says $200 the next business day, the rest of it the second business day.
Okay.
Unless there are extenuating circumstances. So I went back and I tried to get some information for you on what those extenuating circumstances might be. Like, why would a bank put a longer hold on a check? So traditionally, most banks, they're not going to be able to do more than about 7 business days, which is essentially a week. And have we ever talked about business days?
No, we haven't.
Explain this.
My understanding.
Yeah.
So a bank can deposit money up to a certain time of the day. Anything after that time, whether it's during the business hours, is considered to be on the next business day, correct?
Yeah. Now, a lot of banks are now going to same day.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, the rules have changed a little bit based on, like, whenever I first got into banking years ago.
Yeah.
But essentially, yes. So a business day is going to be a day when the bank is normally open for business, right? So that's going to be a Monday through a Friday traditionally.
Okay.
If it's a holiday like a Memorial Day or a Labor Day that falls on a Monday, that is not a business day. Saturdays, even though some branches are open on Saturdays for most banks, that is not considered a business day.
Okay.
Right. So a business day is a Monday through Friday, normal working hours, that sort of thing. So what people don't always get is that the next business day for a deposit might be if I deposit something, say, through mobile banking at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. Well, most banks are already closed for the day. So they're on Monday's business, which means that your deposit may not show up until Tuesday. So even though you're depositing at 10 p.m. Friday, your money may not show up in your account until Tuesday morning. And yet that's still considered one business day, right? And then you see, when you start adding holidays and things like that into the mix, sometimes it can be 4 or 5 days before, even though the bank considers it one business day, it might be multiple days. If it goes over a weekend or something like that, it can be calendar days, significantly more than business days. So anyway, I'm just amazing everybody with my limited knowledge of banking. So back to the holds. So you could theoretically put a hold on the check for up to about 7 business days, right?
Okay.
And normally those reasons are going to be for things like you could be a new customer, right? That could be the first thing. If we don't know you, because I said even with Serena Williams, like, if they knew her, they knew that she was an existing customer, a longtime customer of the bank, they know her history, they know her relationship. That goes a long way toward making the decision on whether or not you have to hold a check, right?
Okay.
But if you're brand new to the bank and the bank doesn't know you, has no idea what your history is, then they may place a hold on the check because they simply don't know you. They don't have any history to go off of.
Okay.
Right. Another one would be a large deposit. So checks worth more than, say, $5,000, those in excess of the current value of your account are more likely to be held. So
if you can't back it, if that check bounces, or put a hold on it.
Yeah. I mean, really. I mean, so, in the case of Serena Williams, chances are she had more than $1 million in her account. It would be my guess.
Yeah.
Unless her accountant is just absolutely awful. But she might have accounts in multiple banks as well.
Yeah.
You know,
because that's not necessarily insured by the FDIC.
ooh, yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a very excellent point there, Jeff. Frequent overdrafts. So if an account has a repeated history of overdrafts, banks may be more likely to place a hold on the check to make sure they clear before releasing the funds. I mean, I hate to say it, but there are people that run really close to the bone when it comes to their accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are habitually overdrawing their account, the bank is less likely to just grant you that deposit in the hopes that they get the money in time for your account to be, considered good or in good standing.
Mm-hmm.
And then also checks previously returned unpaid. So if you're trying to deposit a check that was returned unpaid once or multiple times before, there's a stronger chance your bank will want to validate the check before making the funds available. It can also even depend on who the check is being drawn on. If it's being drawn on the same bank as yours,
Mm-hmm.
the bank might be able to look at that other account and make sure the funds are actually available.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because they're the same customer. They're not going to tell you that.
Right.
Right. I mean,
they can look into it.
but they could look at it and see, okay, well, are there funds available in this account or not?
Sure.
Even that's a little iffy, though, because if somebody has written 12 checks in the same amount and the account might look like there's funds available, but maybe they really aren't because there's 12 checks out there and it depends on which order they come in.
Yeah.
But again, if the check is from a bank halfway across the country, they may not have any clue as to whether or not that check is good.
Okay.
There's also things to consider, like is it a personal check, or is it coming from an insurance company? Is it a treasurer's check or cashier's check, depending that is basically guaranteed funds?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why that's called guaranteed funds?
No.
So a treasurer's check or a cashier's check is considered guaranteed funds. I'm air quoting for those of you that can't see the fact that I'm air quoting.
Oh, because that's written by the bank. That's a guaranteed check.
Right.
From the bank. Yeah.
Because it has to be paid for with cash.
Okay.
So you can't write a check for a cashier's check. You
Okay.
can't use a credit card for a cashier's check. It has to be funds available in your account, essentially cash, that you then get the check from the bank for.
Wow.
So that kind of a check might be a little more prone to not getting a hold as opposed to something else. But even those can still be held. I mean, the bank, it's the bank's prerogative essentially to look at all these different things,
Mm-hmm.
make sure it's not fraud. We talk about money laundering and things like that. There are people that will pass a check from person to person to person in an effort to try to make that money look good,
Mm-hmm.
or look legitimate, even though it isn't.
Yeah.
So, you got to be aware of that stuff. So
Now, we've been kind of talking, or we're assuming we're talking about kind of personal checking accounts. Is there any difference between business to business, or
not really.
not really? They can put a hold on.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they absolutely can. Again, maybe not at that value because businesses oftentimes deal in much larger dollar values, but it's possible. Sure, they could if they wanted to. So yeah, so it's understanding the regulation, and like your bank cannot just unilaterally say, well, we're going to hold this check for a month. Like that's why Reg CC is in place. It says it gives a guideline to say how long a bank can realistically hold a deposit before they give you access to that money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was put in place because there was a time way back, and you know what we should do? I'm digressing again. We should do a 2 cents or a podcast about like some of the history of banking, because some of this stuff, these regulations came about because of things that happened.
Yeah.
And we can maybe talk about that at some point too. That might
That'd
be an
be a good one,
interesting topic. But anyway, there was a time whenever the banks could really hold your check for as long as they wanted to. And that presented all kinds of problems, for people where they were, getting paychecks, but they weren't getting, their checks were bouncing, bills weren't getting paid because the bank was just lollygagging around, not doing their job, not depositing the checks and things.
And that probably played into the, people are not trusting the banks back then. And like we talked about, people aren't putting their money in the banks.
Yeah, like back in the 20s and 30s and stuff during the Great Depression and stuff. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why some of these regs exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine. It's walking that fine line between protecting the bank, protecting the customer, but also doing right by the customer who's, 99 out of 100 people are just trying to go about a legitimate business.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to recognize that, but that doesn't mean that you ignore the fact that there could be the 1 out of 100 chance that there's fraud or something else happening. You gotta be aware of that, so especially in today's world. My gosh, we've had so many conversations about cybersecurity and things like that. But so anyway, getting back, you also brought up a good point about the FDIC. So why else would this be an issue with this $1 million check with
Oh, yeah.
with
So
Serena.
when she put this money in her bank, $1 million is not fully insured by the FDIC. Only $250,000 are insured for her,
For her, right?
per financial institution. So, she may be better off separating that into several different financial institutions.
Mm-hmm. Or there's also different ownership categories she could look into, right? So if she wanted to open a joint account with me, say, right?
Okay.
Right. Well, and then put that money in there. Well, now we are jointly insured for $500,000.
Yeah, still only half.
I get $250,000. She gets $250,000. Right. So there's that option as well.
Uh-huh.
She's not going to open one with. Maybe she'd open one with you.
Oh, I don't think so. No.
We'd both have some explaining to do at home if we had
would.
a joint account with Serena Williams.
We did not too much explaining. I think they'd get over it for $500,000, but yeah.
Probably. Yeah. So that is an option too. But yeah, I mean, you want to also diversify, and there are honestly probably better vehicles to have $1 million in other than a checking account, to be perfectly fair, whether it's a CD or some sort of traditional savings vehicle like that. But also, that gets into talking about, trust and personal trust and investments and things like that too, that have nothing to do with FDIC insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality is probably, if you have a trusted financial advisor, probably a better place for your $1 million to live than your checking account.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different ball of wax that is not FDIC insured. So
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, we've kind of been making a little bit of poking a little bit fun at this, but I think it's a good way to look at some of this stuff and understand, even on our level, for those of us not getting $1 million checks, why some of these things happen.
Yeah. Like, if I won the lottery tomorrow and I won $5 million, what would I do?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the process of doing this legally, putting your winnings into your bank and,
right.
What the steps are.
I'm very happy that you didn't immediately say, after I tender my resignation, what are the first things that I do?
I'm one of those guys that said, if I won $1 million, I'd still work,
And you know what? Sadly today, $1 million is not what it once was.
No.
That's not to say that I'll ever have $1 million, but comparatively speaking, $1 million does not necessarily buy you out of having to ever work again. I mean, think about it this way. Yeah. And again, every area is different. Every part of the country is different. So, but on average in the United States, an average house is like $500,000 now.
Yeah.
Like the average home price the median home price across the United States is like $400,000. So $1 million does not buy you everything it used to.
No.
Even cars. I mean, it's crazy what cars cost.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean,
I'd love to get a new car, but I couldn't afford the payments on it.
No, I mean, some of these cars, and you don't even have to buy a Maserati or an Escalade or something like that for some of these cars to be more than what my parents paid for their house back in the 80s. I mean, it's just, and even accounting for inflation, it's not as far different as you might think.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think this was good. What else do you got? Anything?
Let me check my notes. Nope.
Right. Off we go then. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thanks, Drew.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts, with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to bank chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The host, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The host of Bank Chats is not an attorney, accountant, or financial advisor, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation. Thank you for listening. Please check out our full library of episodes, which can be found on the AmeriServ.com website. You can also download or stream the podcast from your favorite podcast app.